the earth is scarred by time. A massive fissure cuts through the Dong Ban Karst Plateau in northern Vietnam. This is the Tusan Canyon. It plunges nearly 1,000 meters down from the jagged peaks to the emerald currents of the Nyoke River. Geologists say this tectonic rift was formed millions of years ago. To the modern traveler standing on the high pass of Ma Pi Leng, the river looks like a thin green thread. They take their photographs from above and move on. But at the absolute bottom of this abyss, a different reality exists. Sunlight is a rare visitor here. The vertical limestone walls form a tight funnel, trapping the cold air and blocking out the sky. For most of the day, the bottom of the canyon is swallowed by a deep, heavy shadow. The temperature drops sharply near the water. The damp chill seeps into the porous rock. It is an environment of profound isolation. There are no roads down here. There is no cellular signal. There is only the relentless sound of the river carving its way through stone. Yet, in this dark and freezing crevice, life endures. It is 4 o'clock in the morning. The canyon is completely black. A sharp metallic click breaks the silence. A spark flies in the darkness. Then another. A small flame catches onto a pile of dry twigs. The fire illuminates the deeply lined face of a Hmong fisherman. His hands are calloused, stained by years of labor and the harsh weather. He carefully feeds thicker pieces of wood into the small hearth. This fire is the only source of warmth in a world of cold stone. Smoke begins to rise, swirling up toward a ceiling made of tightly woven bamboo. He lives in a small shelter, clinging to the steep bank. The walls are constructed using the traditional rammed earth technique, packed thick to keep the biting wind out. Outside his door, a fence of sharp limestone rocks offers a fragile barrier against the elements. Inside, the morning ritual begins. His wife is awake, sitting silently by the fire. She reaches for a wooden steamer. She begins to prepare men, a staple food made from ground corn. In this rocky wasteland, rice cannot grow. Corn is the currency of survival. The cornmeal is steamed over the boiling water until it softens. The sweet, earthy scent of steaming corn fills the small room. It is a heavy, dense food designed to provide enough energy to survive the grueling physical labor of the day. The man sits by the fire, inspecting his fishing net. The net is hand-woven, soaked in tree sap to prevent the fibers from rotting in the alkaline water. He runs his rough fingers along the edges, feeling for any tears. Every tool he owns has a purpose. Nothing is wasted. He picks up a heavy wooden paddle. It is carved from the hardwood of the ironwood tree, incredibly dense and heavy. He steps out of the warm shelter into the freezing dawn. The air is thick with mist rising from the river's surface. He walks carefully down a narrow, treacherous path of wet, moss-covered rocks. One slip here could be fatal. He reaches the water edge. A small, fragile bamboo raft is tied to a protruding rock. The water is ice-cold, fed by melting snow and mountain springs far upstream. He unties the raft and steps onto the damp bamboo. The raft sinks slightly under his weight, the cold water washing over his bare feet. He does not flinch. His body has long adapted to this extreme environment. He pushes off the bank with his heavy paddle. The raft glides silently into the thick fog. He is completely enveloped by the mist. The towering walls of Tusan Canyon disappear into the white void above. He is a microscopic speck in the grand architecture of the earth. He navigates purely by sound and memory. He listens to the way the water echoes off the unseen stone walls to know his exact position. He knows every submerged rock, every dangerous undercurrent. He is hunting for a specific prize. The green damfish, a rare and elusive species that hides deep within the rock crevices of the Nyoke River. He stops paddling and lets the raft drift. The silence is absolute. He gathers the heavy net in his arms. He stands perfectly still, waiting for the right moment. He breathes slowly, matching his rhythm to the slow pulse of the river. The water of the Nyoke is a striking emerald green, colored by the specific mineral composition of the limestone. But this beauty masks its deadly nature. The currents beneath the calm surface are powerful and unpredictable. They swirl around hidden boulders, creating invisible vortexes that can pull a man down in seconds. The fisherman knows this well. He reads the subtle ripples on the surface. He watches the way a stray leaf spins in the water to determine the strength of the undercurrent. His survival depends entirely on this deep, inherited knowledge. There are no second chances in the Tucson Canyon. If his raft overturns, the freezing temperature of the water would paralyze his muscles within minutes. He moves with an intense, calculated deliberation. Every shift of his weight on the bamboo raft is precise. He raises his arm. The muscles tense beneath his dark clothing. He throws the net. It spreads out in the air like a giant spider web, breaking the silence with a soft whoosh. The weighted edges hit the water simultaneously, creating a perfect circle of white foam. The net sinks rapidly into the dark depths. Now, he must wait again. He pulls his thin coat tighter around his shoulders against the biting wind that funnels down the gorge. The wind here does not blow steadily. It howls through the narrow gaps in the rock, carrying the bitter cold of the northern highlands. It is a constant reminder of the hostile environment he calls home. The sky above begins to shift from black to a deep, bruised purple. Morning is approaching the upper world. But down here, the darkness lingers stubbornly. He is not fighting the canyon. He has become a part of it. The world outside is rushing forward, building cities and chasing time. But down here, at the bottom of the deepest trench in Southeast Asia, time stands still. It is measured only by the rising of the mist, the burning of the firewood, and the silent flow of the emerald water. He waits in the dark, a shadow within shadows. The canyon holds its breath. It is nearly 10 o'clock in the morning before the sun makes its first appearance. The high jagged peaks of the Dongban Plateau finally allow a narrow band of light to pass. It does not arrive as a soft glow. It cuts down into the canyon like a sharp, brilliant blade. The beam of sunlight strikes the surface of the Noke River. Suddenly, the deep emerald color of the water is fully revealed. The water is completely transparent where the light hits. You can see the smooth, water-worn stones resting meters below the surface. The air temperature rises slightly, but the deep chill remains trapped against the stone walls. The mist begins to burn off, dissolving into thin wisps that cling to the limestone. The monk fisherman is still on his raft. He has been on the water for 6 hours. His dark clothes are damp from the morning fog. He moves to pull the heavy net from the river. His hands are numb, moving with practiced mechanical precision. The wet fibers of the net are incredibly heavy. He holds the thick rope hand over hand. His bare feet are planted firmly on the slippery bamboo poles. The water drips from the net, catching the single ray of sunlight like tiny glass beads falling back into the river. A silver flash breaks the surface of the emerald water. It is the green dam fish. Its scales reflect the light, shimmering with a subtle greenish wee that mimics the river itself. This fish is a master of camouflage in these highly alkaline waters. It feeds on the microscopic algae that grow on the submerged limestone walls. The fisherman carefully extracts the fish from the tangled mesh. He does not smile or celebrate the catch. This is merely the daily mathematics of survival. One fish means enough protein to endure another freezing night in the gorge. He places the catch into a woven bamboo basket tied to the center of the raft. The bamboo lid is secured tightly with a strip of rattan. He picks up his heavy ironwood paddle again. He must move upriver before the afternoon current strengthens. The paddle slices into the water with a deep, hollow sound. The resistance of the dense water against the dense wood requires tremendous core strength. He thrusts his weight forward, pushing the small craft against the heavy flow. Every single stroke is deliberate. There is no wasted energy in his movements. He navigates close to the vertical cliff face to avoid the strongest part of the central current. The towering wall of the Tucson Canyon rises straight up beside him, blocking the sky. It is a vertical desert of sharp gray rock. Yet, if you look closely, microscopic life clings desperately to the stone. Tiny, drought-resistant ferns grow out of hairline fractures in the rock. They survive purely on the moisture gathered from the morning mist. Their roots produce mild acids that slowly break down the limestone over centuries. They are a silent testament to the stubbornness of life in this dark abyss. The river curves sharply ahead, forming a dangerous blind corner. The fisherman knows that just beyond the bend lies a shallow gravel bar formed by a seasonal rockfall. He steers the bamboo raft toward it. The hull scrapes gently against the smooth river stones beneath the surface. He steps out into the shallow water. The cold bites instantly through his skin, reaching deep into the bone. He pulls the raft onto the wet stones to secure it against the current. He needs to repair a small tear in his net caused by a sharp underwater rock. He sits on a large, flat limestone boulder that has absorbed a tiny fraction of the sun's heat. From a small pouch tied to his waist, he takes out a wooden needle and a spool of strong hemp thread. His dark eyes are intensely focused on the damaged mesh. He weaves the thick thread through the broken fibers with astonishing speed. His fingers, though thick and deeply calloused, move with the delicate precision of a master weaver. The silence around him is absolute, broken only by the steady rushing of the water over the gravel bed. Above him, a single mountain eagle circles high in the narrow strip of blue sky. It is a silent observer of this completely isolated world. The fisherman does not look up at the bird. His reality is firmly bound to the water, the net, and the stone. He finishes the repair and bites the tough thread to snap it. He inspects the knot, satisfied with its tight tension. He folds the heavy net carefully, preparing his body for another cast. The narrow band of sunlight has already moved across the river surface. It is slowly climbing the opposite wall of the massive canyon. The period of direct, warm light is incredibly brief down here. Soon, the heavy shadow will descend again, swallowing the river. He pushes the raft back into the deeper, darker water. He steps aboard, balancing perfectly as the bamboo craft wobbles under his weight. He begins to paddle back toward the center of the deep channel. The emerald water turns almost black as the shadow creeps across its surface. The ambient temperature drops immediately once the sun disappears behind the high peak. The brief window of warmth has permanently closed for the day. He must catch more fish before the evening wind begins to funnel aggressively through the gorge. He scans the water surface, reading the invisible maps drawn by the shifting currents. He relies on a sensory memory passed down through generations of river dwellers. He is completely disconnected from the frantic, noisy pace of the modern era. Here, human progress is not measured in speed, technology, or accumulation of wealth. It is measured in absolute patience. It is measured in the quiet ability to withstand the freezing cold and outlast the long darkness. The dark water swirls continuously around his heavy wooden paddle. He raises the heavy net once more, preparing to strike. The heavy net hits the water for the final time today. It sinks into the deep emerald current. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun completely vanishes behind the western ridge of the Mapilang Pass. The brief window of daylight is over. A deep, sudden shadow falls over the entire Tucson Canyon. The temperature plunges almost immediately. A cold, damp wind begins to funnel through the narrow gorge. The fisherman feels the shift in the air pressure. He begins to hold the net up. His wet clothes cling to his shivering body. His bare feet are completely numb against the freezing bamboo deck. The net breaches the surface. Inside the tangled mesh are 4 green dam fish. Their silver and green scales glint faintly in the fading ambient light. It is a modest catch, but it is enough to sustain his family for another day. He carefully removes the fish and places them into the woven basket. He unties the bamboo raft and pushes against the strong current. The journey back to his small shelter is physically demanding. He must paddle upstream against the heavy flow of the Noka River. The water grows darker, almost black in the deep shadows. The mist begins to rise again from the freezing surface. Thick white vapor rolls over the water, swallowing the landscape. He navigates blindly through the fog, relying purely on the sound of the water hitting the rocky banks. Finally, the faint outline of his rammed earth house appears through the mist. A thin trail of blue smoke rises from the roof. His wife has kept the fire alive. He drags the heavy bamboo raft onto the slippery gravel bar. It is securely to a massive limestone boulder. He carries the heavy basket of fish up the steep, mossy path. Inside the house, the air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and damp earth. The fire is the absolute center of their existence. The woman takes the basket of fish. She moves to the edge of the river bank to clean them. She uses a small, sharp knife to scale and gut the fish on a flat stone. The freezing river water washes the blood away instantly. She works quickly and efficiently. She brings the cleaned fish back inside the warm shelter. In this isolated environment, nothing can be wasted. They do not have electricity. They do not have refrigerators. They rely on ancient methods of food preservation. She rubs coarse rock salt into the flesh of the fish. She adds wild maccan seeds, a type of forest pepper gathered from the high mountain slopes. The seeds have a sharp, citrusy aroma that cuts through the smell of raw fish. She skewers each fish on a thin bamboo stick. She hangs them high above the central hearth. The heat and the thick wood smoke will slowly cure the meat over the next few days. This smoked fish will be their vital protein source during the heavy monsoon season when the river becomes too dangerous to navigate. Outside, the wind howls against the thick earthen walls. The sharp limestone fence breaks the force of the gale. The canyon is now submerged in absolute, pitch-black darkness. There is no moonlight. The towering vertical walls block out the stars. The only light in this entire abyss is the dim orange glow of their hearth fire. The world of modern cities, with its neon lights and constant noise, feels like a distant hallucination. Here, human existence shrinks down to the small radius of warmth provided by burning wood. The man sits by the fire, inspecting his calloused hands. The deep cuts from the hemp rope are a permanent map of his labor. His young son sits beside him. The child watches the flames intently. He is learning the silent language of survival. He learns how to read the color of the smoke to know if the wood is too damp. He learns how to braid strong ropes from dried vines. He learns that the river is both a provider and a merciless force. There are no schools down here in the deep gorge. The canyon itself is the only teacher. They eat their evening meal in complete silence. The heavy steamed corn provides a slow, enduring heat in their stomachs. A small piece of smoked fish is shared among them. The taste of salt, smoke, and forest pepper fills their mouths. It is a harsh, primitive life, stripped of all modern comforts. But it is also a life of profound clarity. There is no anxiety about the future, only the immediate reality of the present moment. The weight of the geology above them is almost suffocating. Nearly 1,000 meters of solid limestone press down on this narrow trench. The rocks hold the memory of ancient oceans, long dried up and thrust into the sky by tectonic collisions. Now, they form a vertical prison that dictates every aspect of this family life. The atmospheric pressure at the bottom of the gorge is heavy and damp. It settles into the lungs and joints. Yet, the monk people here do not complain. Complaining expends energy. Energy is reserved only for survival. The fire crackles loudly, sending tiny sparks floating up into the dark rafters. The river roars incessantly just a few meters away from their door. They lie down on thin wooden planks, wrapped in heavy, hand-woven hemp blankets. The thick earthen walls absorb the sound of the wind. They sleep deeply, exhausted by the relentless demands of the river. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin exactly as it did today. Before the sun can reach the bottom of the canyon, the fire must be lit. The net must be thrown. The emerald water must be faced once again. This is not a battle against nature. It is an ancient, unspoken pact with the stone and the water. They endure because they must. They survive because they have become indistinguishable from the canyon itself. The rhythmic sound of the river acts as a constant lullaby. It is a sound that has not changed in a million years. The water carving the stone resisting the water, and the humans caught in the middle, adapting perfectly to the silent forces of the earth. For those of us living above the rim, this canyon is a breathtaking spectacle. But for them, it is simply the entire universe. The fire slowly burns down to glowing red embers. The shelter grows progressively colder as the night deepens. Outside the rammed earth walls, the Nyoka River continues its endless carving of the limestone. The acoustic properties of the canyon change at night. Without the interference of the wind or human activity, the sound of the water becomes heavier, It echoes differently against the freezing rock face. It is a constant, low-frequency roar that vibrates through the ground. The nocturnal ecosystem of the Tucson Gorge awakens. It is a world entirely hidden from human eyes. Microscopic blind insects crawl out from the deep fractures in the stone. Small, pale amphibians move slowly across the wet gravel. They hunt in absolute, unbroken darkness. High above, on the vertical cliffs, rare species of bats detach from their roasts. They navigate the narrow, twisting airspace of the canyon using high-frequency echolocation. They hunt the insects that swarm near the water surface. The fisherman and his family sleep through this unseen flurry of life. Their heavy hemp blankets provide the only defense against the penetrating dampness. The hemp fibers are woven tightly, a process that takes the women of the village months to complete. Every single thread is a product of intense manual labor. The hemp plants are grown on the rare, flat terraces far above the canyon. They are harvested, dried, and the fibers are stripped by hand. The women boil the fibers in ash water to soften them. They spin the threads using a simple wooden drop spindle. They dye the fabric repeatedly using natural indigo leaves. This creates a deep, blue-black color that absorbs precious heat. This clothing is not a matter of style. It is a heavily engineered survival tool. It protects their skin from the sharp rocks, the biting insects, and the freezing fog. The physical toll of living at the bottom of the gorge is severe. The constant exposure to cold water and high humidity leads to early-onset arthritis. The fisherman joins Ache with a deep, dull pain. His bones carry the chill of the river even when he is sitting by the fire. Yet, there is no alternative. To leave the canyon means living the only life they understand. It means abandoning the ancestral knowledge that keeps them alive. The history of human settlement in this gorge is not recorded in books. It is etched into the calloused hands of the people. It is built into the thick earthen walls of their shelters. It is woven into their heavy fishing nets. Generations ago, during times of conflict or severe famine on the high plateau, some families descended into the abyss. They sought refuge in the most inhospitable place imaginable. They traded the dangers of the human world for the merciless indifference of the river. Over time, their bodies adapted to the extremes. Their lung capacity increased to handle the heavy, damp air trapped in the gorge. Their eyesight sharpened to navigate the persistent, thick gloom. They became an integral part of the Tucson ecosystem. They do not take more from the river than they absolutely need. There is no commercial fishing down here. There is no massive extraction of natural resources. The scale of their impact is microscopic. A single family, a single bamboo raft, a few fish a day. The immense river easily absorbs their gentle presence. As the night progresses, the temperature hits its lowest point. It hovers just above the freezing mark. A thick layer of white frost begins to form on the sharp limestone rocks outside. The wooden paddle resting against the exterior wall becomes coated in a thin layer of ice. Inside the dark shelter, the man shifts in his sleep. He instinctively pulls the thick hemp blanket closer around his young son. Even in unconsciousness, his mind remains tied to the environment. He listens to the sound of the river filtering through the thick earthen walls. He is listening for any sudden change in the pitch or volume of the rushing water. A sudden, violent roar could indicate a flash flood originating miles upstream. During the heavy monsoon season, the Tucson Canyon becomes a deadly trap. Massive rains on the distant mountain peaks funnel millions of gallons of water into the narrow gorge. The water level can rise several meters in a matter of minutes. The calm emerald surface transforms into a violent, churning, muddy torrent. Entire massive trees are uprooted and smashed brutally against the stone walls. Boulders the size of small houses are pushed along the riverbed by the sheer, crushing force of the current. During those terrifying months, the fisherman must completely abandon the river. He pulls his fragile bamboo raft high up the steep bank. It is securely to the deep roots of the strongest ironwood trees. The family retreats entirely into their rammed earth shelter. They rely solely on the smoked fish, the dried cornmeal, and the rainwater collected in large wooden barrels. They sit in the dim darkness, listening to the violent fury of the earth tearing at the walls outside. They wait with absolute patience for the floodwater to recede. They wait for the deep emerald color to return to the river. It is a brutal cycle of intense physical activity followed by forced, terrifying isolation. But tonight, the river remains relatively calm. The dry winter season holds the destructive water in check. The biting cold is their primary adversary right now. The frozen hours drag on in absolute, unbroken silence. Far above the canyon rim, the modern world continues its frantic rotation. Communication satellites orbit the Earth, passing directly over this deep tectonic fracture. Global digital signals bounce invisibly through the atmosphere. But none of those signals can penetrate the 1,000 meters of solid, dense limestone. The people living down here are entirely cut off from the massive flow of modern information. They do not know the breaking news of the sprawling cities. They do not care about the rapid shifting of global financial markets. Their entire economy is based on the quiet movement of the green dam fish and the slow growth of the resilient corn. Their true wealth is measured in dry firewood and thick, warm hemp cloth. Their greatest success is simply surviving to see another cold sunrise. The deep blackness of the narrow sky slowly begins to thin. The distant stars, invisible from the canyon floor anyway, begin to fade into a dark gray expanse. Another brutal day is approaching the high peaks of the Dongban Plateau. The ancient cycle of survival is about to reset. The Tusan Canyon is a massive geological scar on the face of the earth. It is a violent tear in the tectonic plates, a permanent record of the planet's restless crust. But for the people living at its very bottom, it is not a wound. It is a cradle. It provides the exact amount of water, shelter, and isolation needed to sustain their ancient way of life. They do not seek to conquer this extreme environment. The concept of conquering nature does not exist in their vocabulary or their philosophy. They know that the river and the stone will always win. The geology is too massive, the climate too severe. Instead, they have chosen a path of absolute surrender and meticulous adaptation. They shape their houses from the mud of the riverbank, packing the earth tightly to block the freezing winds. They weave their clothes from the resilient hemp plants that grow on the high, arid slopes. They feed their bodies with the rare green dam fish that hide in the deep emerald currents. They have become completely indistinguishable from the landscape they inhabit. They move with the quiet deliberation of the river itself. If they were to disappear tomorrow, the canyon would simply close over their memory. The heavy monsoon river would wash away the rammed earth walls within a single season. The sharp limestone outcroppings would reclaim the narrow, moss-covered paths. The microscopic ferns would overgrow the ashes of their fires. There would be no massive monuments left behind. There would be no permanent structural alterations to the gorge. And perhaps that is the ultimate form of respect for the natural world. To live deeply, quietly, and leave no permanent scar of your own. We live in a modern era that is obsessed with speed, visibility, and total control over our surroundings. We measure our lives by the rapid accumulation of digital moments and constant, frantic movement. We fear silence and emptiness. We build massive concrete cities to insulate ourselves completely from the terrifying power of the natural elements. But looking down into this dark, freezing gorge, those modern anxieties seem incredibly fragile and distant. The monk family sitting quietly by their small wood fire possesses a different, older kind of wealth. It is the wealth of absolute physical presence and environmental awareness. They are acutely aware of every subtle shift in the atmospheric pressure. They know the exact temperature of the emerald water before they touch it. They understand the complex, silent language of the eroding stone. Their daily survival requires a level of physical endurance and mental fortitude that the modern world has largely forgotten. They do not have the luxury of distraction. Every action, from tying a knot to casting a net, carries the weight of life and death. They are the invisible keepers of the canyon. They hold the fragile line between human existence and the raw, unyielding forces of the deep earth. As the first faint, gray light of a new dawn begins to touch the highest peaks of the Dongban Plateau, the fisherman is already awake. The small fire in the hearth is lit once again. The heavy wooden paddle is lifted from the frosted ground. The fragile bamboo raft is pushed back into the dark, freezing water of the Nyoke. The ancient cycle of survival begins anew, exactly as it has for centuries. It is a brutal, physically demanding, and profoundly quiet existence. It is a powerful reminder that the human spirit can take root and endure in the most unforgiving corners of the planet. There is a deep dignity in their silent struggle. If you found value in this slow, observational journey into the deep gorge, consider subscribing to the channel. We will continue to travel to the furthest, most isolated and extreme regions of the world. We will quietly observe the people who live far beyond the reach of modern asphalt roads and digital signals. We will document their ancient methods of survival and their enduring, respectful connection to the natural world. Our goal is not to romanticize their hardship, but to bear witness to their incredible resilience. Thank you for watching and for taking the time to understand a life lived at the very bottom of the earth.